Hey, it's Digby here. How you doing? Hope you're doing well wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I want to talk to you today about something that's been sitting with me for a little while. Since I ran a workshop with a bunch of leaders, I'm working with plenty of organisations at the moment and their leaders, and they're going through a huge amount of real change, like restructures and new roles, and they're right in the messy middle of it all. And there's this pattern that keeps showing up in all these conversations I'm having. And it got me thinking about a piece of advice that we've all heard 1,000 times. So I want to ask you a question. When people are undergoing rapid real change, what's the advice that you hear most often given? And what I hear most, and you've probably heard it too, is this: it's focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. And it's good advice. And Stephen Covey came up with the circle of concern versus the circle of influence years and years ago. And it stood the test of time for a reason. But I reckon it's only half the story. So focusing on what you can control gives you agency. And that's your ability to take action, to make your own calls and influence what happens next. And that's all good stuff. But just sit with this idea for a second. What if you're doing all of that agency stuff with blinkers on? What if you think you know what's going on, but you're actually missing a big chunk of the picture? And this matters right now because most of us are operating in this kind of environment. There's fast restructures, there's new roles, there's mergers, and teams are being shaped overnight. And there's this pace of change where it's really fast, it's rapid. And in this environment, the cost of getting it wrong doesn't stay small. It compounds. So a rushed decision doesn't just cost you, it costs the trust of the people watching you make it. And if you get this wrong often enough, across enough people, you end up with this culture that's either recklessly fast or quietly paralysed. And neither one of those lasts. Because acting with agency in a context like that, without the full picture, can set you up for a world of pain. So, for example, it might be the new manager who walks in and changes a process before they've found out why the old one was there in the first place. Or maybe it's that leader who reorganises the whole team to fix a performance problem when the real issue was that the goals were never clear in the first place. Or maybe it's that leader that swoops in to solve everyone's problems because that's what they think their job is. And I'll put my hand up here too. So years ago, a lift operator, found me at the top of a chairlift on a ski field, and he's waving this phone message. He said, "You need to call the office. It's urgent," meaning the office where I was working and I was trying to get away from. I was on holiday. And I was the national manager of a recruitment firm. And I was way out of my depth, and I'd gone snowboarding specifically so no one could reach me. And it turned out that the emergency wasn't really one. It never was. But the ride down to the office to call back to head office, it was long enough to ask myself this question: how had I built a job where the only way that things kept moving was for someone to track me down on a remote ski field? I had plenty of agency. I had it in spades. I was always in motion in that job. I was always solving. I was always the one that people came to. What I didn't have was any awareness of what that pattern was actually costing me, or the people around me who'd stopped needing to grow because I was always there to solve it for them. Acting without awareness, I reckon it's a bit like being given a Trojan horse. The Trojans in the Odyssey, they were given this horse and they had the motivation and the means to bring it inside. But nobody thought to ask what they hadn't seen yet. And they paid the price. Now let's flip that. So we've been talking about agency. The other side of this is this idea of awareness. Because awareness without agency has its own cost. And that's where you can see exactly what's going on, but there's nothing you can do about it. So think about a frontline staff member. So they watch customers get more and more frustrated with a policy that the staff member has no authority to change. Or maybe it's this junior analyst who can see clear as day that the numbers don't really support the strategy, but they're not in the room where the decision actually gets made. So a good insight that goes unshared or unheard doesn't just frustrate the person who shared or wanted to share the insight in the first place, but it means that the organisation is probably going to make the wrong call anyway. So it's a bit like, we go back to the Odyssey, or the Iliad actually. This is the story of the Trojan princess Cassandra. So she saw the fall of Troy with total clarity, but nobody believed her. You know, when the wooden horse, the Trojan horse, turned up at the gate, she was screaming that it was full of armed soldiers, but everyone ignored her. And they brought it inside anyway, and, well, you know the rest of the story. So awareness without agency is frustrating if you're the one living it. And it actually costs the whole team, the whole organisation, because there's real missed chances to make wiser decisions and to take smarter action. So what happens if you've got neither? You don't have any agency or any awareness. Well, that's kind of like the team that's sitting on an indefinite hiring freeze, like there's no timeline for this ending and there's no way to plan around it. Or it's staff going through a company merger's due diligence period. This is certainly familiar to a lot of my clients at the moment. And everyone's kind of kept in the dark and there's no way to plan their own next move. So they've kind of got this paralysis going on. It's kind of like Groundhog Day, really. You know, you're stuck reliving the same day, no idea, no way out. And for me, this often shows up in an interesting place, which is writer's block. You know, I write every week, and sometimes all of my efforts to write something useful just results in this frustrating stall. And my brain just seems to want to switch off. You know, you should see how many half-written articles I've got. Okay, so we've talked about three states: agency without awareness, awareness without agency, and then the state where both aren't present. But what if you got both? You've got agency and awareness together. So that's like the new manager who spends the first month just asking questions before they change a single thing. Or maybe the manager who regularly does the floor walk, you know, walks around the floor, see what's actually happening instead of just reading a report, and adjusts the plan based on what they find rather than what they read. Now, it's really the scientific method. You know, you have a hypothesis, you test it, you observe what happens, and then you adjust. It's this loop of curiosity and deliberate action. So let's put these ideas together properly. So I want you to, if you can, picture a 2x2, 2x2 model with 4 boxes. You've got an x-axis and a y-axis. And the x-axis is agency. So how much control you actually have. And the y-axis is awareness, how much of the picture you can actually see. Now, this is a bit challenging. I'll put a link in the show notes to the written version of this, and you can see it all there in front of you. So let's describe the boxes. High agency, low awareness. So that'll be the bottom right box. This is what I call scrambling. It's the scrambling box. You're in motion, you're aiming for a result, but you're ill-informed. If we go to the top left box, this is the high awareness but low agency box. I call this the sideline box. So you're unheard, you're frustrated, and honestly at risk of just checking out. If you're in the bottom left box, where you don't have either agency or awareness, you're just stuck. And what you actually want for yourself and for your people is to be top right, which is to be solid. So scrambling, sideline, stuck, and solid are our 4 labels. And when you're in solid, to be really clear, this isn't about having perfect information. It's not about taking some heroic decisive action either. It's about blending this healthy curiosity with deliberate experimentation. And I've written about that plenty of times before, both curiosity as well as experimentation, as a way of navigating change effectively. It's about taking a deliberate step and then actually noticing the impact. Eyes wide open, blinkers off. And I reckon that's worth the effort, because teams led by someone who's solid don't just move faster, they move together. People trust the decisions because they trust the process behind them. And that's the difference between change that sticks and change that just happens to people. So how do you actually create the conditions? The conditions for this solid space, this solid leadership, for agency and awareness together, for you as well as for your people. So if you're thinking about those 4 boxes and you catch yourself in any of them, let me give you some tips. So let's start with scrambling, where you've got the high agency but perhaps low awareness. So 3 things you can perhaps do. Firstly, you could pause before you commit, and you could ask yourself, what's the problem that we're actually trying to solve here? Secondly, go and get a second vantage point from someone else before you finalise anything. It's kind of like get the second opinion, get a second perspective. And thirdly, just name the pattern of scrambling out loud. You might want to ask yourself, am I racing towards a red light? So let's move to the sideline box. What do you do there to shift from sideline into solid? So here's 3 things. So the first thing is, don't just bring the warning, bring the fix. And if you have both, the solution as well as the issue, you're likely to get a better hearing. Secondly, you could build influence before you actually need it. And I reckon this is so important, that invest in relationships early. And it's not about to get something done. It's just the fact that relationships enable the world to go round. And if you can invest in relationships with people that can help you down the track, you'll be more in the room than out of the room when you need to be. And finally, if you're sidelined and you want to move to solid, then separate the organisation's problem from your problem, because caring about the outcome doesn't necessarily mean it's a verdict on you. If you're in that stuck box where there's neither agency or awareness, then 3 things you can do here is, one is you could run what I call a control audit. And just ask yourself, what's actually mine to move here? Because I think we always have some sense of agency here, or some sense of control. Perhaps we just don't realise it, and we can just sit and ask that question. That can be really useful. Secondly, just chase one fact rather than the whole picture. You don't need to see the whole thing, just the next true thing. And third, don't be afraid to borrow someone else's clarity. Go and ask a person who isn't standing where you're standing and see what they see, and see what they see as a way forward in particular. And if you're already in solid, top right box, you got agency, you got awareness, how do you stay there and keep growing from there? So 3 things again. So keep inviting the challenge, because certainty is different to clarity. And you want to keep seeking clarity. Certainty might always be elusive. Just keep evolving, keep inviting the challenge. Secondly, give your agency away. Don't hoard it, because solid isn't about being the only one who can act. It's about sharing that widely. And third, guard your energy. This is a big one for me. Guard your energy, not just your judgment, because good judgment doesn't survive running on empty. So for me, this is the biggie. Just protect my energy at all costs. So what box do you find yourself in most often? For me personally, it's scrambling, because as much as I love being unhurried, I love the idea of being unhurried, I also love being in motion. And sometimes that's exactly what trips me up. Learning to slow down and ask those bigger picture questions, really important for me to do. To focus on what you control isn't bad advice. It's just half the story. It's the agency half. The other half is awareness. This is about getting as curious about what you can't yet see as you are about being as decisive about what you can do next. So ask the question, seek the other vantage point, and then act. and keep watching what happens. So that's it from me on this idea of agency and awareness. As I said, I've sketched out the model in the written version of this, which you can get a link to in the show notes. So check that out. And by the way, this idea, it didn't just come off some random whiteboard somewhere. It came straight out of all these conversations I'm having with groups of leaders who are navigating this gnarly space of change right now. If working through stuff like this is live for you, what would happen if you got together with a group of peers who are also navigating this? Does that sound useful to you? Because that's exactly what I do with my Leading Lasting Impact group coaching program. I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can check out what that's about, or you can just reply to me, digby@digbyscott.com, and I'll give you all the details myself. No pressure either way. If that sounds like something you want to be involved in, a group of senior leaders together helping each other navigate the gnarliness of leading change for lasting impact, then I have something for you for sure. And finally, just reflect on which box are you in most often. Curious about that. Again, just drop me a line. I'd love to hear where you're at and what questions you've got about how you might want to jump out of that box into the solid box. I'm Digby Scott, and this is Dig Deeper. Until next time, go well.